Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's bylaw and policy meeting for May 16th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have regrets from trustee Mario Pascucci and trustee Darrell D'Souza. We have and student trustee Leroy will be joining us later. Can I start with the opening prayer? I'll call on trustee Luz de Rosario, please.
Mr. Chair, please join me in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving and eternal God, you sent your Son so that we might know your love for us. Grant that through your Spirit, we may remain in you and show our love of you by serving others. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. I'd like to call on trustee Anisha Thomas to do the land acknowledgement.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on sacred indigenous territory and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being the stewards of this land.
Thank you very much. On to A4, approval of the agenda. We have a minor change for the taupe sheets. The wording for M1A in the in-camera section has been changed. Can I have somebody move the agenda as amended? Thank you, trustee Thomas. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. On to A5. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. A6, can I have the approval of the board bylaw policy review committee minutes for February 21st, 2023? I call trustee Luz de Rosario, will you approve that or move that?
I was not in the
thank you.
attendance at the time.
Thank you. So trustee Bruno Anika, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Madam Director? Or
Good evening. There's no pastors' remarks, nor words or presentations or delegations this evening. We're in section E, which is updates and information reports from trustees for receipt, the Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association.
No report at this time.
thank you very much. You beat me to it. E1B, are there any good news items? Seeing none, I move on to F. There's nothing for F. Going with G1, policy 1.02, code of conduct trustees. Led by Council Beck.
Through the chair, Council Beck is going to present this evening. It's on page 12 of your e-agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, good evening, everyone. Trustees are required to review policy 1.02 code of conduct trustees every 4 years around this time. Trustees do have two options when reviewing this. Number one, the committee may pass a motion recommending to the Board of Trustees that no changes need to be made at this time, with the understanding that there's nothing prohibiting trustees from directing staff to bring this forward at any time again. Number two, the committee may also pass a motion stating that changes need to be made and to direct staff through the Director of Education to make changes and bring the policy back. With that in mind, I'm happy to receive your comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Council Beck. Are there any questions? For trustees who are online, if you want to just, you can either text me or you can put a note in the chat. Seeing none, thank you very much for the report. Moving on to H1, policy 6.75, special education programs, identification, placement, and review.
Through the chair, Superintendent Vecchiarino is going to present this on behalf of Superintendent Papaloni this evening, and that's on page 24 of your e-agenda.
Good evening, everyone. Continuing through the chair. Policy before you this evening is with regards to the rescission of our current policy number 6.75, Special Education Program Identification, Placement, and Review Committee. All trustees are well aware, the process of identifying exceptional pupils and making recommendations regarding their placement is enshrined in Dufferin Peel practice. It's an important part of the support that we do for students who are identified as students with special education needs. As staff continue their ongoing cyclical review of all policies, it was determined that this very brief existing policy simply states that Dufferin Peel follows regulations set out in the Education Act. As that fact of doing what we are asked to do from the Ministry of Education, and which is already enshrined in policy number 1, overall governance, mission, vision, multi-year strategic plan, bylaws, and policies, which states that we follow all applicable laws and related legislation, it was deemed that the existence of policy 6.75 is redundant. Therefore, in keeping with our ongoing process of refining the number of policies that we have and ensuring that they meet current needs, as mentioned earlier, this policy is being placed before trustees with a recommendation for it to be rescinded. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? All right. Okay. Thank you very much for the report.
There's a motion.
Oh, sorry, there's a motion. Yes, thank you. Actually, you saw that there. So the motion reads that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 6.75 Special Education Program Identification, Placement, and Review Committee be rescinded. Moved by Trustee Luza Rosario. All in favor? Any opposed? None carried. Thank you. Moving on to our next item, H2, Policy 0, Procedural Bylaw, and Policy 1.06, Electronic Meetings, Teleconferencing, presented by Council Beck on page 27 of our the agenda.
Thank you. And through the chair, staff were directed to bring forward policies that refer to requirements of confidentiality of in-camera meetings when trustees are attending electronic. Policy 1.06 is before you. Policy 1.06 deals with electronic attendance at meetings. It did require updating to reflect in policy what your current practice is for attendance electronically at regular board. It essentially states now that the board is required to provide electronic access to meetings, students, members of the public, subject to the confidentiality rules. Combine this policy with its corresponding gap, 701.04, and therefore that gap will now be rescinded. Procedural bylaw was slightly amended, sections 5.10 and 6.7, to add requirements for trustees when they are attending meetings electronically, including in-camera meetings. The highlights include being in a room with a closed door in open meetings to avoid distractions, being alone in a room with a closed door when attending an in-camera meeting, ensuring that no one can overhear the deliberation. The requirement for the camera to be on at all times. The trustee turns off the camera, the recording secretary will mark them as absent until they return, and using the mute button when the trustee is not speaking. As trustees consider these changes, particularly with regards to the procedural bylaw, I wanted to let you know that the procedural bylaw will also be coming back to you later in the summer or in the fall. It's just being brought to you now because of the specific request regarding confidentiality. So trustees are being asked two things tonight. Report. That is that the board bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the procedural bylaw be approved and enacted as amended. That the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees Policy 1.06 be approved and enacted as amended. Happy to.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I have Trustee Bruno and Nika. Are there any other questions? Trustee Loser Reserve, thank you. Are there any questions online? Okay, Trustee Bruno and Nika, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, with request to the cameras being on, would that be the request, having to be the request? Bruno forgets to put the camera on, whatever reason Bruno forgets. Would it be the chair? It's the trustee's ultimate responsibility. I get it. I understand it, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. But if Bruno happens to forget, would it be the chair's responsibility to advise?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, so trustee Stefano Pascucci could say to trustee Anika, who's at home with the camera off, to trustee Anika, could you please put on your camera? Just wanted to be clear. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Trustee Loser Reserve, go ahead, please.
Question is actually related to that. I can't seem to find that in the regulation or the policy that I'm looking at. What section is that? That we have to turn on our camera. So perfect example is tonight, all of the attendees online. This is a committee meeting. They turn on their cameras, or is it only board meeting? Anyway, two questions, sorry. My first question is, where exactly is it in this policy or gap? Then the second question is it happen in committee, board meeting? Or both?
Through the chair, if we look at the practice of what happened before virtual even existed, a trustee had to get up and leave the meeting, then it would have been noted in the minutes that he left the meeting, then left the meeting at 7:30 and then returned at 7. So it would seem that the same kind of attention to ensuring that all trustees are in the meeting is given to trustees that are also attending virtually. So if your camera's not on, you would not know whether or not the trustee actually just turned their camera on or whether they've actually left the meeting for short. Therefore, you need some kind of mechanism in place to for the recording secretary to know that all trustees are in the meeting. It also affects quorum. Because if the camera is off, you don't know whether they're in the meeting or they just, trustee Inika's point. So I think what trustee Inika was saying, before you automatically mark them as have left the meeting, can the chair just check in with the trustee to say, trustee Del Rosero, can you please turn your camera on?
Should I send a note saying I'm having dinner, so I'm going to turn off my camera?
Yes.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
we're rushing from one meeting to another. I would turn my camera off just to get my dinner along the way. So would we be able to send a note to the chair and saying, I'm turning off my camera because I'm eating right now?
Through the chair, we can rework that wording so that it puts the onus on the trustee to say, to let the recording secretary know that I'm going to have my camera off for a bit. I'm in the meeting, I'm going to have my camera off. So we can reword that wording.
Thank you. And which section is it that I could find it?
Through the chair, are you looking for the section in the legislation or are you
No,
looking
in our gap.
in the procedural bylaw?
Procedural bylaw.
Section 510 in the procedural bylaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I see Trustee Bria Corbett has her hand up, but before you speak, I'd just like to remind everybody to please speak inside into your mic. A little bit difficult to hear online. Trustee Bria Corbett, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. Yes, my apologies with some tech issues tonight. I logged into Teams instead of Zoom, but it's all good. great discussion on the camera issue. Because I came in a few minutes late, my apologies. Are we requesting camera on for public meetings as well as in camera? And are we requesting camera on for when you're chairing? And what's the process with chairing regarding in-person attendance versus being virtual through the chair?
Through the chair, I think the important point that needs to be made is we need to know whether or not trustees are in the meeting. That's the important point that needs to be made. So as long as, there's a responsibility of the trustee to ensure that if they've turned their camera off, they're still listening, but they've indicated to the recording secretary, I'm at the meeting, my camera's off, but I'm here, or I have to step out of this meeting for 10 minutes. I'll let you know when I'm back. That's the important piece that needs to be made, because if we were holding the meetings only in person, we would visually see when trustees are leaving the board and then returning back.
Thank you, Madam Director. Mr. Chairman, just one more question regarding this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you. So regarding chairing for or vice chairing, is our policy included in this bylaw as well in terms of being in person versus chairing virtually? Because for me, when someone is chairing a meeting, either in person or virtually, I think it's really important that you can see them. And when someone's chairing a in-camera meeting virtually, I think their camera must be on, because I think it's really difficult to conduct a meeting from an effective perspective, but also from a transparency perspective for the other attendees. So I'm not sure if that's been reflected in the bylaw, but I would like to see that somehow articulated if possible.
Through the chair, the regulation with regard to electronic meetings identifies that either the chair or the chair's designate has to be in person. It's silent on whether or not the vice chair also has to be in person. But that doesn't mean, if trustees wanted to make that as an expectation, they could, because sometimes the chair has to turn the chair over to the vice chair. Whether or not you can navigate that virtually, if you're comfortable with that, that's fine. But we can make a notation if it's the will of the trustees to ensure that if you're chairing, right, first of all, if you're chairing, you really are supposed to be present in the boardroom. So vice chairs do chair the in-camera meeting. So technically, if vice chairs, because this Board of Trustees has a practice that the vice chair chairs the in-camera meeting, and technically it means the chair and the vice chair of committees and board meetings should be present in the boardroom. If trustees are comfortable with the vice chair doing that or fulfilling that responsibility virtually, which predominantly would be for the in-camera meeting, or if the chair gets turned over, then it can be stipulated in the procedural bylaw that if you are chair or vice chair, that you're either in the room or your camera's on.
Through the chair.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That would be my preference. That I understand it's not always possible for individuals to be in person, but at the very least, if they are chairing or vice chairing virtually, I believe their camera should be on. That would be my hope, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, we'll make that change to the bylaw.
Trustee Corbett, are you done with your questions? Great, thank you. I have student trustee Diaz-Acoli has a question as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification through you that student trustees will also be subject to the new rules in this bylaw.
Are the student trustees subject to the same bylaws?
Through the
Thank you.
chair, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Are you done, trustee Sakoli?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Trustee Luzar, go ahead, please.
Just a point of clarification. Under the procedural bylaw 5.10, electronic attendance is on page 52. Just want to clarify. It says here, the Board of Trustees shall allow attendance at meetings by electronic means in accordance with the Education Act and our policy 1.06 as amended or replaced. Then it goes, the Board of Trustees may deny one or more trustees access to electronic attendance and require them to be physically present at following meetings. So
Through the chair, that there was an updated policy
old?
sent out this afternoon. It's possible, did that not get eliminated from it? It was the taupe sheet. So is that the updated one that
that
trustee Del Rosario is
looking
referring
at
to?
the first package.
That section was taken out.
That section was
Yeah.
taken. out. It looks like it's been.
Yeah, it
raised
was
and
it
updated,
was
so
in the original agenda, but there was a revision this afternoon. That
has been
should
taken.
have been taken.
There-
Okay, thank you, trustee Luzario. Is there any other questions? Trustee Bruno Nika, go ahead, please.
Just for my clarity. I understand, agree that the chair should be here. No ifs, no ands, no buts. I'm unclear about the vice chair. Because to me, if I'm not here as chair of faith and program, then Herman needs to be here, right? I don't know. My feeling is that if the chair's here, the vice chair's here, because as you indicated, this is hard enough as it is. Just trying to get questions, seeing people around the table. My feeling is if you're the chair or the vice chair, you're here. The other trustees, they can decide whether they are or they're not. Personally, I always find being here, it's different. It just is, the feel is different. The look is different. The understanding of the conversation is different, but people make up their own minds. So it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other, but, so I'm unclear. I know the chair has to be here. The vice chair have to be here.
Through the chair, the point that I had made was that the regulation is silent on the vice chair. They say either the chair or the chair's designate must be physically present for the meeting. The other point that I made is that the vice chair technically chairs the in-camera meeting. So they act as chair at some point in the meeting. They also act as chair if the chair turns the chair over. So while the regulation is silent on the vice chair, that doesn't stop the Board of Trustees from going above that and saying it's our expectation, or it's the expectation of this Board of Trustees, that the chair and the vice chair must be physically in attendance at meetings.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the director, then how do we introduce that? Does it have to be a question of trustees on whether they prefer Or is
Through
it
the
just?
chair, if you have consensus here this evening, that's how we've been taking the input for the amendments to the procedural bylaw tonight. If you have consensus, well, if you have trustees, which I can tell from body language, at least around the room, that they're fine with that, then we will put that in. We'll incorporate it into the procedural bylaw. Procedural bylaw, you're only recommending these changes tonight. It has to come to the board meeting. It will be at the board meeting as to whether or not that goes through. If there's a trustee that doesn't agree with it, they'll speak out about it, or they may vote not in favor of those changes. But we also know that the majority rules.
So looking around the room, there's 5 trustees.
Right.
Majority would be 6.
You have trustees online. All as I'm saying is tonight.
No,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking at my colleagues online. I don't see any of them saying, I doing this, I just don't see it. If what I heard was, yes, we're going to make the change and trustees that aren't here can argue it or voice their concern or their opinion at the board meeting, then it'll go to a vote and move on. Is that what
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So then, Madam Director, should I be asking for consensus then amongst the trustees?
Through the chair, you don't need to ask for consensus. We're taking all the input, we'll incorporate it. We'll bring it forward to the board next week, and that's when it's coming forward for approval.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
Bit of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So what you will put in the amended document will include that the chair and vice chair are expected to be in person.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none online, on here. Thank you very much for the report. There are 2 recommendations for consideration. Number 1, that the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the procedural bylaw be approved and enacted as amended. Can I somebody move that, please? Moved by Trustee Thomas. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Next one is that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 1.06 be approved and enacted as amended. Can I ask Trustee Anisha Thomas to move that? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you very much. Next, on to H4, policy 5.30, supply chain management, presented by Executive Superintendent Chair
chair.
Baca. Yes.
We have H3, policy
Oh, sorry.
5.25.
Thank you. I marked off by accident. Thank you. H3, policy 5.25, student trustees, presented by Superintendent Veccarino and Superintendent Lewis. That's on page 111.
Hello again. I'll be presenting the report on my own in Superintendent Lewis's absence. As trustees are well aware, we currently support student engagement on the Board of Trustees through 2 student trustee positions. Recently, you as trustees approved a motion supporting the addition of 1 Indigenous student trustee position. This report simply summarizes changes to policy 5.25, student trustees, to accommodate the addition of the 3rd trustee, the Indigenous student trustee. Consistent with the Education Act, the policy outlines the number, qualifications, election process, and other procedures associated with the recruitment, election, and support of student trustees. Section 3 of the appropriate regulation indicates that board may have no more than 3 student trustees, therefore making room for the additional position that was added by you as a Board of Trustees. review of the existing policy resulted in amendments being made to accommodate, as I mentioned earlier, this addition. Aspects of candidate identification and towards the role of Indigenous student trustees have led to the development of a new general administrative procedure, which supports procedures overall, and these have been decoupled from the policy. The new general administrative procedure outlines the support that will be provided by the Indigenous Education Council in determining a list of appropriate candidates, which will then follow for the election of that third position, a similar process as is already in place for our existing 2 student trustee positions. Given this addition, the change was made and there is a motion before trustees for approval as well. The documents are appended, the amended policy and the added general administrative procedure. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Trustee Luz Rosario, are there any other questions? Go ahead, Trustee Rosario. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, under the draft letter number 5, Indigenous student trustees shall be elected by Indigenous student council member. Not in our last discussion, when we were asking about this, I thought it will be elected by the student body. Wrong?
Through the chair, no, and I'm Indigenous. That is, sorry, just give me a moment to review this. We said that we would solicit input from all Indigenous students who were interested in having their name put forward, and then that I remember it this way, that Indigenous Student Council members would vote. If trustees feel that we would want to broaden that to the entire student body, that would mean that we would have non-Indigenous student body members electing an Indigenous student trustee.
I'm actually trying to clarify because that's the way I remembered it. I remember asking the question, or one of us asking the questions, asking who will vote for the student Indigenous trustee. And my recollection, and forget me if I'm wrong, but my recollection was the answer is all the students can also vote.
Through the chair, can I have a moment to caucus with Superintendent Vectorino?
Thank you for your patience. I'll try to go at it from the beginning and happy to take more questions. Through you, Mr. Chair, if we look at the 2 student trustee positions that represent the entire system, students self-nominate or are nominated and they put their names forward. They come here, I believe it's in February or March, for an election process. At that election process, every school in Dufferin-Peel is welcome to send representatives for that election. And it is that group or council of students who elect the 2 student trustees. It's not the entire population, but it is representatives from every school. So the North and the South. For the Indigenous student trustee, the process is analogous, but slightly different. So the students also self-nominate. The added step is that they make their interest known to our Indigenous Student Council. Our Indigenous Student Council, our Indigenous Education Council. Our Indigenous Education Council, because it is one of the items that they have jurisdiction over, they say, yes, this student is someone who we are happy to have represent us. So let's say that they come up with 2 people. Those 2 people then stand for election. They make their presentations not to the same students, but to a group of students who have made their own self-identification clear to us, and they become the Indigenous Student Council. So like the representative from each school, these are also representatives from our schools who have identified as Indigenous, and they then elect that one person out of how many ever nominate.
That's basically that Indigenous Student Council from all the schools, no north, no.
That is correct. And I would say that almost all of our schools, but not all, because we do have more Indigenous students in some areas than in others, but most of our schools now have someone on that council, and we continue to solicit membership from all of our schools.
All right, thank you. I think I understand now.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have trustee Bruno Iannica, then I have trustee Paula Metto Giovinazzi. Trustee Iannica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure where I got the idea that it was the elders that were going to have. I say that respectfully. I don't know if it's referred to as the elders. My recollection it is, but I could be wrong. That they were going to have not the say, but the recommendation. So can Steph explain that part to me? Because it's different. I'm thinking it's different from what I just heard. I need to be clear on it, please.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair. Any student, any secondary student in Dufferin Peel who self-identifies as Indigenous can self-nominate and say, I want to stand for student trustee. Keep in mind, there will not be huge numbers of these students coming forward, but let's say that we have 4. They will then make their intent and interest known to our Indigenous Education Council, which is comprised of elders, other community members, because elders is a term used primarily by First Nations people, not as much by some of the others. And then that group working through staff, in particular our Indigenous education lead, will say, you know, student X comes with this, student Y comes with that, etc. They will then review them. If they feel that all 4 members would make equally good representatives of the Indigenous community, they would support them. So as you said, as Trustee Iannica said, those people would then be free to stand for the election, and then they would make their representations at the election proper, and the students on the Indigenous Student Council would make the decision based on a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Trustee Paula D'Amato Giovinazzi, please go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair, I wanted to ask, so is it possible to have the Indigenous Education Council approve the candidates and then have all the students do a vote, just like with the student trustees where the students vote? Is it possible to have all students vote for student trustee and Indigenous student trustee at the same time on the ballots?
Through the chair, that in response, and I hope I understood the question correctly. If not, I would ask that it be rephrased and I'll try to go at it again. Our current practice for our existing 2 student trustees is that representatives from each of our secondary schools elect the 2 trustees. And so we would be following a similar process for the Indigenous student trustee, except that instead of being represented, instead of the vote happening by that group of representatives, it would be a group of representatives who identify as members of an Indigenous community.
Okay, thank you, Max. So can you clarify that? How are the student trustees elected currently?
So the two student trustee positions that are already part of the board, this is a portfolio that I had many years ago, so I hope that my memory serves me correctly. But in approximately February, the Office of the Superintendent that supports the two student trustees sends out a package of information. That package includes a timeline and it includes an application form. Students review it, and then people start to decide, yes, I'd be interested, no, I wouldn't be interested, etc. At the same time, we bring together representatives from each one of our secondary schools, and if I'm not mistaken, we bring together the chair of their student council or student senate, and an additional representative who is called a student voice representative. So at a maximum, we would have 52 people who are, for lack of a better word, electors. We don't usually have that many because some schools have a difficult time recruiting those people, but let's say that we have approximately 50 people. Those people come to the CEC, and in two divisions, one north of the 401 and one south of the 401, they listen to speeches by the people who have expressed an interest in becoming a student trustee, and then they vote. And then one person is selected for the north and one person is selected for the south.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Online? None? I'd like to pass the chair over to trustee Vice Chair Anisha Thomas. Thank you. Thank you very much, Max, and staff for the report. I'd like to look at page 113, section 4 and section 5. So section 4 says Indigenous student trustee candidates will be identified through the consensus by the Indigenous Education Council. Approved candidates shall be identified from amongst interested students who identify as First Nations, Métis, and/or Inuit. Remember when we were speaking about this before, I asked the question as to what criteria would they be using to pick as a valid candidate for student trustee? Is it going to be just that there? It must be First Nation, Métis, or Inuit?
Through the chair, yes.
No other criteria will be used to vet them, correct?
No additional criteria when we use that.
So as long as they meet the First Nation, Métis, and/or Inuit, they will be approved. So if we have 5 individuals that show up as one of these 3, as a First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, that all 5 will come forward as student trustee candidates.
So through the chair, perhaps I didn't say this earlier, so I apologize. Anybody who is who identifies as a member of an Indigenous group, and in Canada that grouping includes First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Any person who identifies there can say, yes, I'd like to stand to be the Indigenous student trustee. It is then the council who review that interest and say, person X, person Y, person Z, we're perfectly happy with having them stand for Indigenous student trustee, but person T, no, that's somebody that we wouldn't want to represent us. And so that person would not go forward to the election. That's where the role, as was mentioned previously by Trustee Yanika, that's where the role of the Indigenous Education Council comes in, if you will, to vet the applications and ensure that these student trustees can stand for the community, because we know that Indigenous people value the concept of subsidiarity, nothing about us without us, and that they want to have a say in terms of who will represent them.
Okay. If you look at the Education Act, the qualifications to become a student trustee must be a full-time pupil, an exceptional pupil of special education programs, looking at right now. And then to become an Indigenous student trustee, you must be First Nation, Métis, or Inuit. I don't agree with the Indigenous Education Council saying that student T cannot be somebody if they've met the requirements to become a student trustee and meets the First Nation, Métis, or Inuit criteria. Because then that would not be a free and fair election. Just like individuals like ourselves, we can't stand for Catholic school trustee unless we're a Catholic school supporter. If somebody was not, then yes, they would be disqualified. But if a student meets the other criteria, full pupil, exceptional pupil, so on and so forth, and also the added First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, then they should have the ability to stand as a student trustee because they put their name forward.
So through the chair, point makes sense in terms of the way I believe that non-Indigenous people perceive this process. For Indigenous people, being a representative of community is a very important part of the process as well. And so I am not always comfortable in speaking on behalf of Indigenous people, as I've said before, but our concept of citizenship or our concept of representing community and those concepts in the context of indigenous ways of doing and learning are not the same. And so the Indigenous Education Council, and this is supported by the Ministry of Education, one of their roles is to advise you as a board of trustees and us as staff that the processes we are undertaking are representative of their ways and their culture. And so that is the change. That being said, in my time with our existing Indigenous Education Council, they are always happy to support everyone. I mean, they want to uplift voice. If they were to say person T really doesn't represent us, my sense is that there would be some very powerful reasons for that. Not that we've encountered anything like that up until this point.
Well, and thank you very much, Max, for that. And thank you for the education. I appreciate that. Thank you. My question is done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead. Go ahead, trustee Bruno Inika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to assume that they too need to be Catholic.
Through the chair, no. That is not a requirement for our existing student trustees.
The chair, the trustees may recall that recently a legal outcome in another board made that decision.
I don't recall, but it would be, I don't recall. But I don't recall.
Through the chair-
You know,
yeah,
it's a
through the
it's
chair, there
Catholic
was a-
board.
There was a
Yeah.
There was a legal decision, a court decision resulting from another board that was brought forward to all boards last fall, and policies were changed. In fact, we were contacted as well to ensure that the policy was changed.
I don't recall, and that's something that I should recall, but I do not recall that. I guess it wasn't.
We can provide you with the.
I
the
believe,
meeting with-
I'm sure the staff provided information. Either I skipped over it or I obviously didn't see it. Obviously, I did not see it. But it surprises me that I can't have an elected trustee be non-Catholic, but I could have a student trustee be non-Catholic. And the logic to me is nil. There is no logic because that could. I mean, all of our student trustees that we've had here have been spectacular and gone on to have impact in the world. So, but it's kind of strange, but it is what it is. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Seeing none. The following recommendation is provided that the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 5.25 student trustees be approved and enacted as amended. Moved by Sean Xavier, All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Pass the chair back to trustee Stefano Piscucci.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, staff, for the report and for the education. Thank you. H4 now, I'll try this a second time. So H4, 5.30, supply chain management, presented by Executive Superintendent Sherapaka, and that's on page 138.
To the chair, yes, an executive superintendent has joined us virtually because she's on other board business offsite this evening.
You go ahead,
Thank you.
Executive Superintendent Sherapaka.
Thank you. And through the chair, this evening we bring forward policy 5.30, supply chain management, and its associated GAP 706. Both documents were brought forward to the February 21st bylaw policy review committee meeting. Several changes were reviewed and approved and adopted. However, at that meeting, there was a request to provide some additional detail in the area where we would address vendor performance and to ensure those procedures were very detailed so that we and vendors would understand what the process of DUF and PL is. Superintendent Hester will review the changes for you, which I believe are highlighted on page 156 of your agenda.
Thank you. Good evening, and through the chair, as Executive Superintendent Sherapaka noted at the prior meeting, there were changes requested to GAP 706, specifically around the area of vendor performance management. So on page 156 of the agenda package, you will see the highlighted areas there, which reflect the edits that we've made to enhance the language. So what's shown there now is really kind of three key changes. So we've highlighted why the process exists, what takes place when there are concerns brought forward, and what are the steps to kind of investigate those concerns. And then what are the, in the final paragraph, what are the consequences if the concerns are not addressed in a satisfactory manner? So the consequences may be in terms of a removal from our current contract, or if they're quite severe, they may lead to a full disqualification and ineligibility to participate in future DPCDSB procurement opportunities. At this point, we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Do I have any questions from trustees? Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for the report. And let me just get page 138 again. We have the following motion that the board bylaw policy review committee recommend to the board of trustees that policy 5.30 supply chain management be approved and adopted as amended. Can I have somebody move that, please? Trustee Thomas. Any opposed? Favor? Passed. Thank you very much. On to H5, policy 6.59, school graduations. Superintendent Vaccarino. Once again. Sorry, and that's on page 191 of our agenda.
Yes, I'm just going to move over a little bit because people have a big head. Anyway, continuing again through the chair. Policy 6.59 is being brought forward with a potential recommendation, and this is with regards to school graduations. As trustees are very, very well aware, one of the most important milestones for our students comes as they leave our system and they graduate. Recent concerns have been brought forward by members of the Board of Trustees with regards to considering expansions to this policy. And these are highlighted in the discussion section of the report. Not only do we contemplate in the changes being made how graduations are and other significant events, how they're to be conducted, but also who is recognized as an honored guest, who is asked to speak, who is seated on a platform, and who hands out awards, etc. Although this policy was recently revised. I believe it was last year or the year before. We have continued to make refinements to it and to its associated gap 511.01. In particular, the policy is being recommended to be renamed and to include not only graduations, but graduations, award ceremonies, and other significant events, as well as the associated general administrative procedures. Contents have been updated with regards to who is, as I mentioned earlier, in particular, speaking at the events, recognized at the events, and given priority seating. These changes are outlined in the reviewed drafts, are there for your consideration, and as always, I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Okay, just one second. Are there any other questions? Hey, Trustee Bria Corbett, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. I believe I'm happy to see this policies come forward for review again and some discussion, hopefully tonight. I believe we need some consistency that extends beyond just graduations, and like that was already referenced. Particularly, I've come across some situations where other individuals have expressed either speaking at a school event, attending a school event, being recognized at a school event, and different schools are doing different things. I believe it's really confusing for the school administrators, certainly puts individuals in an uncomfortable position where they don't have a policy to refer to other than the graduation policy. And specifically, there's a lot of school events. Our schools are busy places. So there's curriculum nights, there's open house nights, there's school council meetings, there's barbecues, there's plays and virtue assemblies, and there's a whole host of things that happen throughout the school year, which is amazing. And we certainly want to be inclusive of other members of our communities that are interested in participating and being involved. And we certainly want other levels of government engaged as well. My question, Mr. Chairman, is relative to the changes that have been made this evening or proposed this evening. Where does this put us in terms of other school events, such as the ones I just mentioned? Whose responsibility is it to put out the invites? Who's speaking? That in particular, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, please.
So through the chair, the response to trustees bringing this item forward was to broaden the concept of events that would be included. And that's why we use the word significant events, understanding that not all schools, first of all, not all schools may be named the same event, the same name. Not all schools celebrate the same events. Size of school might have an impact, location of school might have an impact. And so we wanted to ensure that we encompassed all with the word significant, but also wanted to ensure by those same words that we didn't disinclude any particular event. And knowing that we can't make the list exhaustive because different schools celebrate differently and new events might come on in the fullness of time, we wanted to provide some broad guidelines in terms of who was recognized and acknowledged, my apologies, but also not to make those guidelines so restrictive that we would be having to go back at this policy or to have it reviewed on a regular basis. We'd be pleased to take any specific comments with regards to other specific events. We felt that broadening graduation by specifically adding award ceremonies, which are often attended by a great number of people, and then also saying other significant event would both include and allow some latitude.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Vaccarino. Mr. Chairman, I just have some follow-up questions if possible.
Yeah, Trustee Corbett, yeah, no problem. If you can just speak up a little bit louder, if you don't mind.
Oh, my apologies. I am wearing my headset. I'll try to speak up some more. I'll turn up my volume as well. Thank you for letting me know. So regarding page 195, I believe, where so 1.3, it says other community representatives attending graduation ceremonies shall be acknowledged by name, and some may be invited to present awards. Is that a case where we may want to add award ceremonies or other significant events, just because it makes reference to graduation? Just not sure. And same with 1.6 as well. I'm just, as I was going through the document, and there's a lot here, I just think perhaps there's some areas where maybe the language needs to be consistent throughout. I don't know if we need to specify graduation ceremonies every time. If this gap refers to grads, ceremonies, significant events, that would just be my one feedback. But also where it says, so 1.4, only the chair and or vice chair of the Board of Trustees, local trustees, director of education or designate principal, chair of the Catholic School Council, parish pastor, priest, local member of provincial parliament, member of parliament, and mayor are permitted to address the graduation. If the local MPP, MP, and or mayor are not able to attend, designates will not be invited to attend the graduation ceremonies. So again, it's specific to graduation. So I don't know why it's in that case just graduation, but for graduation or other school events, I would like to have added in the I would like to change that last sentence. And again, just a proposal of an amendment, but I would like to change that last sentence so that if the mayor is not able to attend, then the local city councillor may be invited to address the graduation ceremonies. I believe it's really important. Our local city councillors are oftentimes working with us on a lot of issues that overlap where it comes to whether it's school traffic zones, school safety. And I know I have a very good relationship with my city councillors. I think it would be important to include them. Personally, I don't need the mayor and the local councillor to speak at the event. No different than when, Chair Del Rosario is at an event. I'm happy to defer that to her. I don't need to speak at those where they don't need to hear from both of us. But I would like to see that included for our local city councillor, if possible.
So through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of points. Absolutely, we can review the language. I believe that changing from the mayor being able to speak to a councillor being able to speak is a significant change. So I think that would require trustees to have input. That's not for me to comment on, but that is not actually a change that we made as part of this particular review. It was already in place. If I could direct you to page 196, you will see that a later section of the report refers to non-graduation other events. We felt that graduation is, if you'll pardon the vernacular, a fairly high ticket item, and we tried to keep it somewhat separate from the multitude of other events that could be still quite major, but also minor. And so we were trying to balance providing some latitude for those other events. And so if trustees scroll down, they will see how the changes are decoupled from the graduation itself. So you will say that some subsection titles are specific to graduation and some are not. So that's one point. The other, with regards to making the change to local council, as I said, that would be something on which staff would be pleased to take direction.
Go ahead, trustee Corbett. Is this
Thank you.
is this a
Thank
new
you.
question or continuing on?
No, this is continuing on, Mr.
Okay, go
Chairman.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Vaccarino. I appreciate the clarification. What you referenced on page 196 is section 1.8, I believe, and it does in fact say, award ceremonies, other local significant events, to which then you have to go to section 9 of the GAP. But in reference to page 195, 1.4, where I was mentioning the mayor, it was not certainly preventing the mayor from speaking. That was not my intention. I apologize if that is how that came across. My intention was that last sentence, that if the local MPP, MP, and or mayor are not able to attend, that a local city councillor would be invited to attend and address the graduation ceremony. I don't need a designate for the MPP or the MP, but I do feel that if the mayor can't attend, that the local councillor could and should be able to speak on behalf of the mayor, as they do often at other city events.
Through the chair, that is not a change for staff to direct, so I'm happy to take direction from the Board of Trustees.
I have trustee Bruno Nika to this point as well, unless trustee Corbett, do you have any other questions?
I'm happy to wait till the end, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Trustee Bruno Nika, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think that it should all be uniform. It should be one, whether it's an awards, whether it's graduation, whether it's a 50th anniversary, regardless of what it is, my feeling is it should all be the same people that speak or don't speak. I have no intention, from my perspective, to vote for a local councillor to speak at graduation. I get along very well with my local councillor as well. I got along even better with the previous counselor, who just happened to be my cousin. And I never in 31 years ever was invited to speak on anything. And I got along with both of them extremely well. I can tell you I was invited to a function that just happened to be 2 minutes from where I lived. I found my own seat. I wasn't recognized. I didn't speak. And the people that spoke about how great of a job they did. They didn't speak about what was going on right there and what was there that made up that community. So I'm not in favor of having any counselor unless I see the local council change their rules or their policies. Then personally, I'd be open to reconsidering it. But right now, I haven't, and I'm not. For me, I'm very blunt when it comes to that, because I've had 31 years of it. And now because one person wants to speak, you have to change our policy. I'm sorry. I won't support that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Trustee Luzar, is it to this point as well?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Trustee Corbett mentioned an event that I was in with the director. We were invited. We were actually invited by the mayor's office. And it was very cold morning too that we went. And when we were right in front, we were not even recognized at all at that mayor's event. And there had been a few times. But what I want to take you back now is at the recent mayor's International Women's Day breakfast. This is what the mayor said. I also would like to recognize the trustees who have not been recognized before. This is basically her words. Because we had written a letter to the council basically saying after that incident that the director and I were in, we wrote a letter. And actually, that was also after the incident where trustee Anika was in and was not recognized at all. So we wrote a letter basically asking them, we would like, if we were invited, we would like to be recognized, at least be recognized, right? We're not even asking to speak, but just to be recognized. So at the recent International Women's Day, that's the first time that we were recognized at a mayor's event, at a council's event. But going back to having them speak at graduation or awards night, you gotta remember the event is for the students. And this is what I basically, especially for the awards night. The awards night, the kids just want to get their award and enjoy the evening and party. So even for myself, when I speak, I pick the shortest speech that I can do. Congratulations, a little bit of a something, but then go get out of that stage so they can get moving on. Even at graduation, I'm very particular because especially if you have 400, 500 kids that's going to go on that stage, they're not paying attention anyway. So remember, it's only the first 8 minutes or so that they would listen. So to change this one now, I'm really concerned if we have to add them to all the other events. Could you imagine what it would be like if politicians are there in all our events? I'm just very concerned. I don't want it to become a political platform. That's what worries me. That it will become, our school events will become a political platform. I think this policy is what it's trying to avoid, to make sure that it doesn't happen. So I think for me personally, I am comfortable with the way it is, this 1.4. We should not worry about what the counselor says, because some of them really don't even recognize us. There's some that are good, there's some that are not. Some that get along well with you because you know that you can help them during their campaign, but I'm sorry. I think I'm old enough to know whether I'm gonna do this or not, but I'm gonna leave it the way it is. I'm also going to add to this one, very specific, who is going to send the invitation. Very important that the principal this is the school's event. We as trustees are only guests of this as well. We're also invited to their event. So we get a little bit miffed if we don't get invited, but it's our school, we want to be invited. So I'm happy with the way it is and who is it going to be. I just want to make sure it's added here, who is responsible in sending out invitation and the guidelines that they need to follow. Going to that very bottom page that Max is talking about, that is talking about the award ceremonies and other significant events. Would you consider open house a significant event? Is it? I'm just kind of, is an open house a significant event for the school?
Through the chair, I might suggest, first of all, to your previous point, trustee, through you, Mr. Chair, it is made very clear on page 198, section 4.1, that the principal is responsible for the invitations. And there's a list of specifically who the principal is to invite personally. The first two being the chair and the vice chair of the board, and then the local trustees and student trustees. So to that point, just so that you know that it is there. In my opinion, for what little it's worth, an open house depends a little bit on the tradition of the school. There will be some schools, the school where I was principal having been one of them, where open house was an enormously big deal. I know that some of our other schools now, perhaps some of the smaller ones as well, have a significantly more contained event. That's why we did struggle with the word significant, because we wanted to make sure that we didn't shackle the hands of our principals to the point of having 700 rules for something to which only maybe 3 or 4 families would be invited. So to allow them with some local latitude and respect for local traditions as well.
So in section 8 through the chair, sorry, can I just continue? Section 8.2, principal shall invite the honored guests, which e.g. MPP, MP, mayor, regional chair, regional councilor, city councilor, local councilor, to present an award if possible. I guess we are very clear that they are not to speak.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
So they can be invited. They can be invited, the councilors, the mayor, they can all be invited, but not necessarily they can speak.
Through the chair, yes.
I agree. I will support that. I think this is exactly the way we are with the city council. That's the way they treat us now. Before we get invited, we don't get recognized. So now I think it's starting for us to be recognized during their own event. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Del Rosario. If there are no other questions to this point, Trustee Trustee Bruno, go ahead, please, to this point.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is not a tit for tat. It's not. Trustee Del Rosario made a couple of really good points. And I think the one that sticks more in my mind of everything that she said, and I listened to every single word, was the political aspect of it. Let's assume, and thank God it only comes once every 4 years. And we, during our time, we go every year. It doesn't have to be election year, but we go every year. But now imagine other political elections going on either at the same time or a month before or a month after, which has happened with respect, obviously, the councillor elections the same day as ours. The provincial is I think it was in June. So, now you're getting, where local MPPs go in, and Trustee Del Rosario made an excellent point. Graduation is not about me. Graduation is about the kids. Graduation is about the parents. There's been times just in the past couple of months that I have attended functions, and the organizer and the principal, or it was 2 different things. The principal was at school, but the organizer, they had it at the secondary school, and asked me if I wanted to speak. And I said, no. And they were surprised. I said, no, this is a concentrating area right now. They don't need to have another 1, 2, 3 minute speech from somebody. So I like the way that staff has structured it. And I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Unica. Are there any other questions or comments to this point?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
So there's none else. So Trustee Bria Corbett, the floor is yours again.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through
Sorry,
you.
sorry, I do apologize, Trustee Corbett. Trustee Thomas was on the list as to this point as well. Sorry. Go ahead,
No problem.
Trustee Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Corbett, go ahead, please. Trustee Thomas wants you to speak first.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Trustee Thomas. I believe what I'm hearing from Trustee Unica and Trustee Del Rosario is the concerns they've expressed. It highlights a reality, unfortunately, where as elected officials, we haven't been recognized, we haven't been invited, or we haven't been asked to speak. And I believe actually this year we weren't even invited to the Mayor's International Prayer Breakfast, where in the past we have. I hope that was just an oversight, and hopefully that will be corrected in going forward. But it seems that there needs to be significant efforts made in order to strengthen the relationships between our mayor, our local city councilors, and our trustees. And hopefully with time, we will be afforded the same courtesies that we've extended to them. Regarding making these political events, that certainly is not my intention. However, we have invited every other level of government. So it just would seem important to have the local level of government, of which we are on the same ballots with these individuals. But having said that, if it's the will of the trustees, I mean, certainly my perspective has been shared this evening. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Corbett. I'll give the floor to Trustee Thomas now.
Thank you,
Sorry
Mr.
about that, Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't in a favor of changing 1.4. The reason behind this, Luz mentioned, I have an experience. Even last year graduation, the Master of Ceremony invited the counselor to present an award. As soon as the person went to the stage, didn't give the award, start speaking. Okay? Not, the person is not invited to speak, to give an award, start speaking. So, and I don't want to change anything on 1.4 if we can cut up to MVP. Even we don't want to move beyond MVP, MB or mayor or the councillor. I think we can make a stop up to MVP because they are in part and parcel of the funding for the education. We don't want to move inviting too many guests over there and speaking, and the children getting bored and the parents getting bored. We don't want make this is a political platform. So we have to make short and sweet graduation, then everybody enjoy. So hope we can, everybody together and understanding, we have to stop it until up to MVP. That is my one penny contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Thomas. Are there any other comments to this question or line of questions? Seeing none, Trustee Corbett, did you have any other questions or comments? Are there anybody else that have comments or questions? Okay, I'd like to pass the chair on to the Vice Chair, Anisha Thomas. I have a brief comment if it's possible. Thank you. So I'd like to, so section or page 198, 4.1, or section 4 and then 4.1, that is specific to graduation exercises. Seeing how many of our schools are hitting their 50th, 25th year and so on and so forth, can we please either add to this list and rearrange the wording or create a 4.2 or whatever you want to call it, adding any past trustees that have had a significant impact to the opening of the school or whatever it is, because many of the trustees who were here at the time when schools were open or may not be here, and that they should also be recognized, or not recognized, but rather invited to something such, you know, monumental as 25 years of a school and so on and so forth. So I don't know, add to the list or rearrange the words or create a 4.2 with another list of attendees.
Through the chair, that's an easy check for us. I also will review prior to making that change to make sure that that isn't already contemplated in a specific gap on anniversaries. So we will cross-check the two, and if it needs to be added here, we can have that done for next week's board meeting.
Thank you. And I also like to add as well, and obviously we can invite the world, but also past principals as well. So past principals or administration as well.
Through the chair, I believe that that's standard practice. I can't think of an event at which that sort of invitation would not be issued. But again, we will cross-check the two, and we can ensure that that's included for next week's board meeting.
Thank you very much. And since you mentioned practice, one thing that I noticed last year's graduation season, some schools and as platform guests, school council chair presidents or chairs rather, are noted as a platform guest. Some schools had them sitting on the floor, and some of them had them sitting up on the stage. So if we can ensure that that's also then noted to principals that school council chairs are invited. And if it's co-chairs and it's 2 seats, don't mind. And if they can't make it, I will like to have the exception of vice chairs as well. Somebody from school council who has put their time and effort into the school community for that year, and sometimes many years, should at least be there to represent the parents as well.
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please. Sorry, I was going to go ahead.
Are there any more questions? Go ahead.
Trustee Stefano. Just a comment on the Catholic School Council Chair. There was few times that I've encountered some of the school council chair prefer not to sit on the platform or on the stage. So that's why they were sitting on the first row thing. So that is probably one of the reasons some of the school council chairs prefer not to. They're willing to be there at the front and do their speech. So just for consideration, I guess that's the option, that's the choice that the council chair will make. So I don't know how you're gonna say that in this platform list. I just want to point that out because I think if we say you have to sit in the platform, but if I am so shy, I don't really want to be in that all throughout. Put me on that first row. I'll be up and speak. Something like that.
Through the chair, again, we don't highlight items specifically of that nature in this document, but I would think that practice would in all of our schools would align very much with the point made by the trustees to be respectful of individual preferences in that regard.
Trustee Stefano Piscucci.
Thank you. Just to sort of lose this point, and I didn't mean to make it sound like they were forced to sit up there, but merely that there is a seat available to them and that the principal does offer them a seat. Yeah, thank you very much, Luz, for putting that up. I didn't mean to, to handcuff them and put them and say, you have to go up there or that's it. So I just want to make sure that the offer is made and that there is room available to them. So thank you.
Are there any more questions? Seeing no more questions, there is a recommendation that the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 6.59, school graduations, be approved and enacted as amended. Moved by Bria Corbett, Trustee Bria Corbett. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
Madam Chair, just I tried to get in there quickly. In that motion that you just read, does it not need the full name of the motion, which I believe has been changed?
Through the chair, it is the policy with the old name that is being amended. One of the emendations is the change in name. It will be reflected in the motion that's brought to the board for next week.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, it's passed. Giving chair back to trustee Stefano Vespucci.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, staff, for the report. Section H6, policy 8.03, emergency instructors, Superintendent Strong. That's on
Thank you.
page 209. And please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, this evening, I'm bringing before trustees a revision to policy 8.03, emergency instructors. This policy was originally written under the umbrella of the Education Act to cover off when uncertified teachers needed to fill in for certified teachers. However, there has been an expansion in the use, and what we needed to do was make sure that the policy followed the appropriate procedural steps to ensure that qualified staff are always given an opportunity to fill the vacancies first. As such, we are proposing a recommendation that the title of the policy be changed to emergency. Wait a minute, sorry, emergency supply staff, my apologies. And I'm happy to answer any questions the trustees may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from trustees? Seeing none here, none online. We have a recommendation that the board bylaw policy review committee recommend to the board of trustees that revised policy 8.03 emergency instructors be approved and enacted as amended. I have a mover, please. Trustee Anisha Thomas, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you very much. On to H7. Decision of policy 11.00, provision of services to persons with disabilities. Superintendent Strong. Page 214 of our agenda.
Thank you. Through the chair, we're bringing forward this evening the revocation of policy 11, provisions of services to persons with disabilities. This policy was originally written under an Ontario regulation under the AODA, which implemented different layers of service standards to be compliant with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. This piece of legislation that prompted this policy has been repealed and replaced with the Integrated Services standard, for which the board already has a policy. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, sorry, online. No, there are no questions. There is a recommendation as well that the board bylaw policy review committee recommend to the board of trustees that policy 11.00 provision of services to persons with disability be rescinded. Trustee Bruno-Nico would like to move this, please. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you very much. On to section I, notices of motion. Section J, additional business. K, questions asked of and by trustees. I'll start a list. Very quiet group today, so there are no questions by trustees. There are no declared interest items. I'd like to have somebody move motion to move in camera, please. Can I have trustee Thomas? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. It is currently 8:33. 10 minutes. We'll be reconvening at 8:43. To everybody who is online this evening, thank you very much. We look forward to hopefully seeing you when we return from in camera. But if you will be leaving us tonight, I hope you'll have a great evening. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. To those who are still online, we are back in open session and our rising reports.
We moved approval of the minutes from the in-camera session of the Bylaw Policies Review Committee of February 21st, 2023.
Thank you. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Sean Xavier. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. On to adjournment. Can I have somebody move adjournment, please? Trustee Luz de Rosario, thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much for logging in and listening to us this evening. Hope you all have a great evening.